Firstly, I just want to say and get this on record that I apologize that I got a sinus infection, so I just sound like Nick Nolte or something like that.
Well, that's, not a bad thing to sound like.
No, but towards the later part of his career, he was definitely like, there was no septum. Like, he was just in a rough way.
As long as you don't look like Nick Nolte. And remember that mugshot when he got pulled over for like driving on GHB or something?
God. He looked like he got pulled out from like a fishing net at low tide.
He's still working, apparently. He does the voice for the new Mandalorian, the teaser for the new Mandalorian show.
No shit.
On Disney Plus. So his voice is still valuable, actually.
Good for him.
He's doing voiceover work for Disney.
He's not a young man, too, if I understand that correctly.
No, he's 78.
Fuck me.
Nice.
Why do I try to like exercise and shit and like watch my diet?
Well, it's a lot easier to stay healthy if you're very rich.
Good point.
Yeah, they give him like they get special cocaine that makes you it's like infused with something that makes you last longer.
Good for him, man.
Milk thistle.
Yeah, that's what they're giving George Clinton too, I swear.
Well, milk thistle's like a liver thing, right?
I knew a guy who insisted that like you could do anything to your body in terms of drugs and alcohol and any kind of abuse as long as you took enough milk thistle. And he got like boxes of it. And I mean, I tried it. I was like, sure, man, I'll take a milk thistle. I don't know really how much it improved my liver health or whatever, but
You're still kicking. You're looking relatively healthy.
oh, thanks.
I mean, look, I thought about this today, like thinking back on like how many times I got sick this year and just like had like boomer back injuries, like some people that may listen that would know that I like was supposed to go to DC and then didn't because I got a fucking boomer back injury. And thinking back on it, I'm like, yeah, I know I'm getting older. And then I started thinking about like being in school and seeing kids that came from like true poverty and shit and how they were just like always sick and just like they had no winter jacket and just like wearing a hoodie when it's like 4 degrees out or whatever. And I was just like, oh, fuck. Like I can hear people's voices looking at them or those people saying like they got to get their stuff together. They really got to make some changes in their life, but they have no fucking idea what it's like. And it's just like this constant cycle of being fucking sick. Anyway, I don't know. It's something I was thinking about today. Welcome, Leslie.
Oh, thank you.
Would you like to share any of your personal traumas with us now that we're going round robin? Nice.
Leslie, I think I saw you in, did you do something live with Street Fight and maybe Katie Halper?
Yeah. Well, I did their live show with them a few months back in New York. Yeah, and Chapo was on there as well. Yeah, I did. I was at Littlefield, and then we did. Yeah. I did that show, and then me and Katie did a show with Matt Taibbi like 2 months later, and then I was actually just there a few weeks ago with the Antifada and Pod Damn America.
Oh, the Halloween thing, right?
Yeah. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Our intros, unlike everybody else's advice, they tend to last for like 20 minutes.
No, that's a good technique whenever you do a live show. Always try to extend the banter as long as possible and then go to your pre-planned stuff. That's good for when you do a live show.
Oh, really?
In their pocket, yeah.
Oh, that's good to know. Well, when we started this thing, like, what, in July? Something like that? I don't know. I just remember sweating a lot, so it must have been somewhere around there. We were like, hey, we'll see where this goes. It's a joke. Ha, ha, ha. Let's see, let's put our earnest into it and see, if there's any value. And then after we wrapped the first one, I was like, as a joke, I was like, yeah, we're probably going to end up doing like a live show in Brooklyn in like fucking 5 months. And now somebody already asked like to do something like that. I'm like, Jesus fucking Christ, man. I'm like, I don't even know how to like navigate that.
Your listeners will come. Your listeners will come to get that live show going. Make a little bit, make a few ends. But you got to do merch. Book it far enough ahead that you can get some T-shirts printed for not too much.
Yeah, we were talking about that last night. I think the title of our show, we benefit so much that it would make, even for someone who doesn't know what the show is, it would still make, you know what I'm saying? Like, eat the rich. Yeah. It's a great fucking T-shirt slogan.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got all kinds of symbology out there. The hammer and sickle with the fork, that's everywhere. You can simple stuff you could do, and you making the merch is the key to making money. Basically, it doesn't matter if like 5 people show up at the show, you can still make money if they all buy a t-shirt.
The interesting thing to me about doing a live show is that, at least given the general content of what our podcast is, which is, talking about these like awful millionaires and billionaires, is like, I mean, by, I guess, certain criteria, I already was doing a live show by just screaming about this on the subway in my mid-20s just all the time, just like losing my shit and just like soapboxing a whole bunch. So, I mean, hey, if anybody's willing to pay for it, I'll do a live show right now. I'll go out in the street in Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, how to have an Eat the Rich live show and remain unactionable and parody.
Yeah, I don't know if you can edit out all of the things that I say.
Well, that's the great thing about the live show, is that there's no record of it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You can
Yeah, it's all ephemeral. You can say whatever you want.
you can say more shit at the live show, but thing we found out on our podcast, and this is like truly legit, as long as you say allegedly or parody, like, you're pretty free and clear, because this came up in a legal case with my co-host Jack Allison. He does a Jack AM show, and I forget who he had on, but he had on like a journalist or something that's in like some kind of dispute with some like rich asshole, and the rich asshole's lawyers actually watched Jack AM's Twitch stream to try and get him kicked off the case. The guest that was on Jack's stream kicked off the case, but because Jack, like, in a very funny voice said this is a parody allegedly, the judge ruled that it's actually fine, and he could say that because he said, yes, even as a joke, it was like a parody. Allegedly.
Love the activist judges. Get that precedent.
Oh my God, that frees up so many things I can say.
Yeah. No.
I'm just swimming in possibilities of alleged parodies.
Yeah.
Unactionable. I'm going to start to get like vastly more violent about my ketchup opinions and fast food burger opinions, because it is getting divisive on my timeline.
Well, I was going to say something that comes to mind for me as a lucrative opportunity for some non-actionable alleged parodies is Bloomberg apparently is going to enter the race now.
Oh God.
Oh, because that was his threat if one of the candidates that was actually good looked like they were taking the lead, and it hasn't even happened yet because it's Elizabeth Warren that surges and she sucked. But yeah, he's blowing his load, I guess, a little bit early. Like, again, like, I was actually at the DNC in the building in Philadelphia when he came on stage, and I could feel like a wave of evil coming towards me from when he was speaking.
Oh yeah.
He's just like a complete other, piece of shit that Hillary Clinton brought to the DNC and wanted to speak, but didn't want Nina Turner to speak at it. So they should be reminded of that forever, that they created this monster, helped create this monster at least.
I was thinking, I remember a couple years ago when Michael Bloomberg like bought up all of like thousands of website domains that were like, Michael Bloomberg is a loser, Michael Bloomberg is an idiot. I think he bought all those up so that nobody can make those websites.
Shane probably remember this. My absolute favorite Bloomberg moment was during Hurricane Sandy, and he did his like, newscast from wearing like a freaking members only jacket or whatever in front of the podium at City Hall. And he did his thing about how, the storm is blah, blah, blah. Little update. I know that there was a moment with his advisors to be like, okay, and then we have to go into the Spanish translation of it. And he was like, no, I got this. And he did it in Spanish, but it was like, La tormenta es muy peligroso, por favor, no afuera. Miss that Bloomberg. I would just have a monstrous fake Italian mayor that kills groundhogs. It's true. Look it up.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do a special episode on him at some point. I have a lot to say about our good friend, the former mayor of New York City.
In fact, now that I'm thinking about it, we should actually probably just do like a 3-part episode on New York mayors.
Sure. Yeah.
And like exclude Giuliani, because it's not even like fun anymore, because he's just like, well, Chris is texting him relatively regularly.
Leaving him voicemails. Yeah. It's still fun.
Oh, that reminds me. I don't know. We should maybe just chat about this really quickly. We did a little trip to probably the most singularly evil 3 or 4 block radius at
Yes, we did.
The Wall Street Stock Exchange and the Bull and the old City Hall and all the Federal Hall, all the buildings around there.
The damage on the wall on the exterior from the anarchist terrorist attack, which is still there and very cool.
Wall Street bombing of 1920.
Allegedly.
It was allegedly very cool that the anarchists bombed Wall Street.
Why do they have a statue of a bull when they should really have a commemorative statue of the horse that did not make it from the 500 pounds of heavy sash weights put into the timer detonation? Yeah, no, a profoundly weird and evil part of the country, especially in New York. Just standing in front of the New York Stock Exchange, standing in front of Federal Hall, standing on literally like on the line where like the Dutch and the British sparred, standing literally where there was like slave auctions. Not a lot of people talk about that. They kind of like whitewash it into the South, but this was very much a slave auction territory. Yeah, a profoundly evil few square blocks.
Perhaps the most, maybe the Pentagon would be the only other one that compares. Perhaps the most concentrated evil place in the entire country.
I'll put one in for Times Square.
Yeah,
but ever since they Disneyfied it used to be cool.
Yeah, but for Eminem related reasons alone.
Leslie, what about you? What would you be your like most singularly evil part of the country?
Probably the part I live in Northern Virginia, where all the military contractors reside.
Yes.
It's also the highest per capita income in the country too. So
really,
in the county, yeah.
Leslie, I'm from Virginia originally. I'm from Richmond.
Okay, yeah. I'm not from here. I just have lived here for the past couple of years.
Let's see, yeah.
I actually did take a look. I would love to go to Northern Virginia to see Paul Manafort's shitty house. I did see when it went down the brownstone in Brooklyn that Paul Manafort bought it was just money laundering. There was nothing there. No one lives in there. No one has ever lived in there. Yeah. Northern Virginia is a real one, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty awful for the most part. Tons and tons of needless development, luxury condos everywhere,
endless strip malls.
Yeah,
but is there Fuddruckers?
Actually, not that I've seen. No, like the best. Like we got TGI Fridays, which is lower class. I think Fuddruckers. We had Fuddruckers in Louisiana.
We had a Fuddruckers in Richmond when I was a kid, but I think it closed down like 20 years ago. I don't even know where there is another one around there.
What the fuck is a Fuddruckers? You can't just say that. You can't just make up a name.
Just look at this Northeast New York elite. Never heard of a Fuddruckers.
It's coastal elite. It's a good place to get like a design your own burger and $1 Budweiser.
Okay, don't do free advertisement for them now.
You know, the last time I was in Northern Virginia, tell me if this sounds familiar, Leslie, but like, God, I don't remember why we were there, but I think we had to stay in a hotel or something like that before we were going to fly out from Dulles. And we went to a gas station just to get like, I don't know, some water and some candy or something like that. And I want to say it was like a Tuesday night. I think it was in the winter. It was dark. Maybe it was like 7:00 at night or something like that. And a guy that just looked like, you know, kind of like a middle management dude, like in a suit, got out of like a Chevy Equinox, fucking wasted at the gas station. And I was just like, what happened between him leaving, you know, his fucking Raytheon meeting where they were talking about like droning Yemeni weddings or whatever, and then getting that fucking hammered before 7:00 to go buy combos?
Well, that's assuming he stayed at work until 5. He might have left at noon and then gotten day drunk at the TGI Fridays. And then this was the second round. Especially if it was like a Friday.
It was a Tuesday.
Oh.
I remember very distinctly it was in the middle of the week.
Club going up on the Tuesday.
Just the phrase day drinking at the TGI Fridays. It's like a new haunting fucking idea.
That's class.
Nothing more indicative of like a sundowning empire than managers day drinking.
I remember being in a bar one time, and there was like I was sitting next to this old guy who was like telling me, like he was like just going on and on about the benefits of day drinking because you're far less likely to get pulled over for a DUI because they're looking for people at night.
Just the idea that he's trying to game the system. Well, I've come up with a totally new thing. This is really going to get one over on them. What if I start drinking the moment I wake up?
Waking up to an eye opener to own the libs.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers taught me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No, sir, I'd be no average man. So I had those big dreams.
Welcome back, everybody, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off its death rattle. I'm Dwight. We have tonight with us Shane.
Hello.
We have Chris.
Howdy, folks.
And we are super pleased to have with us Leslie Lee III from Struggle Session. Fuck me!
Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. It's a mouthful. Struggle Session is a mouthful.
Yeah, you're keeping that in. There's no second take.
God. There's a lot of S's in there, and I'm not even going to get away with a second take. I think we just have to move past it.
No, that's it. That's it. You got it.
I mean, I think this is pretty timely for what we want to talk about today. Vince McMahon and then further on later, Linda McMahon are some really bad characters that I think between myself, Shane, and Chris really were interested in and wanted to call some backup in for, because these guys are just some very entertaining, absolute monsters that moreover have some enormous wealth that they've gotten, I think, ill-gotten wise. So Leslie, could you give us a little bit of a primer on Vince McMahon and the WWE?
All right, so I think most people know of Vince McMahon. If they, you mentioned, you called them a character because he actually is one. In the WWE, the wrestling company that he owns and runs hands-on, he is a character on the TV show, and he plays this awful boss who mistreats his employees, exploits them, crushes their attempts to do the union, sexually harasses the female wrestlers, says the N-word, etc., etc. That is the character he plays on TV, and he's actually a worse person in real life. He is one of the most awful, evil people, I think, in the world. As a lifelong wrestling fan, grew up watching WWE. But you can't help but come to the conclusion that this guy has, almost as much, blood on his hands alone as like all the NFL owners, at least on a per capita rate, right? As if you actually, tallied up the number of wrestlers who've passed through and have their lives ruined by working for Vince McMahon, and, compared it to like the NFL, there's a higher attrition rate, I think, for professional wrestlers. And I think actually people have done crunched the numbers on it. They have they're known for having very high rate of death, of suicide, of drug overdose, of people's hearts just exploding when they're in their 40s because they juiced themselves up so much while they were working for WWE, specifically because Vince McMahon, as I think most people are casually aware, has a real big man fetish. He really likes the bodybuilder look for a wrestler. But if you remember old school wrestling, not every wrestler didn't used to look like a bodybuilder. Someone like Dusty Rhodes, who had some weight on him, didn't have a lot of muscle structure, but he was still a very popular wrestler. Ric Flair, never, the biggest guy in the world, but he was a still very successful wrestler. But those are two wrestlers who came to prominence outside of WWE initially. They wrestled in the NWA, which was part of the territory system, the territory system was basically all these regional wrestling companies that Vince McMahon put out of business because he decided to take his regional company that was located in New York that he inherited from his father and turn it into this national international thing. It used to be back in the day that if you were watching wrestling, that meant that you were taking your family to the auditorium every Sunday, buying your ticket to see the regional wrestler. And these were still big stars, but Vince McMahon basically turned wrestling into something that people more watch on TV. And if you see it live, it's more like like the circus, where the WWE comes to your town maybe once or twice a year, and that's where you see it. So he broke that kind of local connection to professional wrestling. I think, to the detriment of, professional wrestling itself, as well to the quality of professional wrestling, and I think to the detriment of the professional wrestlers, because now he basically, up until a couple of months ago, had a monopoly on, high-paying professional wrestling, or even not even high-paying, but living wage professional wrestling in the United States, because he had crushed all the other companies who could pay a living wage, and he took a lot of jobs away from a lot of people and kept most of all the money for himself. He on TV, as his character used to brag about being a billionaire. Now he's not quite a billionaire anymore, but he did makes a big deal about how much money he's made from mostly not being a wrestler, while all these wrestlers worked under him, and a lot of them end up destitute, broke, poor, drug addicted, having really miserable lives. They've sacrificed their body to make him rich, and he's more proud of that situation than pretty much any other rich asshole in the world is.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, he's and we haven't even really gotten into the worst things he's done, right? That's just the general thing, right? So
isn't his son a character too?
Yeah. Oh, his whole family, not just characters, but they also run the company too. His daughter is right under him. His dipshit son-in-law Triple H is possibly the next in line. His wife was the president for a number of years. Now she's working for the Trump administration. Vince McMahon and Trump are very good friends.
That's right.
Shane McMahon actually is kind of a prodigal son, because he left to kind of do his own thing at one point, but now he's back in the fold. He's kind of a piece of shit too. Like, he's actually, the rich kid that treats everyone nicely and with respect. Like, all the wrestlers really respect, Shane on a personal level, because he's just like a good guy generally. But the problem with Shane is, and this gets into the problem with WWE, and how Vince McMahon kind of justifies a lot that's going on, because Vince McMahon, he takes steroids too, he bodybuilds too, and he wrestles occasionally too, and Shane McMahon wrestles occasionally too. But the thing with Shane is, and Shane is known for doing like really, outlandish, dangerous stuff in the ring. He puts himself at risk just like one of the boys in the locker room. But the thing about Shane is that when he dives off, a scaffold, through a table, he can take 6 months, a year, 6 years off. When the next guy does it, he has to be back there the next day, or he'll lose his spot and possibly end up losing his job and getting fired. So his stunts escalate what fans expect from the wrestlers to do, but he's not there to actually deal with the consequences of it.
Well, one of the things I read though, is on that topic is that the wrestlers, they're not categorized as employees.
Oh yeah,
they're categorized as independent contractors. They don't have health benefits. They don't have anything like this, and it's actually, like you were saying, what's expected of the other wrestlers as compared to what's expected to Vince McMahon's kid, is that it's like written into their contract that if they're unable to wrestle for 6 weeks due to an injury, the company can terminate their contract, even if the company or the
after 6 weeks.
After 6 weeks, even if the company or the promoter was liable for the injury caused by their own negligence, they can still terminate their contract after 6 weeks.
They'll always be liable. Pro wrestling, of course, is a sport where injuries just will happen. You can't do pro wrestling without injuries. There's just no such thing, and the wrestlers know that going in, and not that that's excuses them being mistreated, but the problem with the WWE, of course, is that they take advantage of that, where they don't give wrestlers time off or an off season, which would make a lot of sense, where wrestlers can be punished or have their position in the company diminished if they take time off, or they can just straight up be fired while they're injured, which has happened a number of times. Like you said, and wrestlers, yes, they're not considered employees. They're called independent contractors. Now, you would think, if they're independent contractors, then what that means is they can go and do their own stuff away from WWE. If they're not working, they can possibly wrestle for another promotion. No, of course not. They can't do anything. WWE even has access to their social media and post stuff for them and release stuff for them. Yeah, they're under such lock and key. They have, I don't know if they still have this, but they used to have even a dress code for when they go to the airport and when they're traveling. They had to wear, and they were still calling them independent contractors. No health care. They don't get the benefits. They pay for their own travel. They pay.
No way.
Whether it's hotels, cars, planes, they pay for it. Now the guys at the top, they might get a bus or a private plane as part of the contract, but everybody else, they're carpooling 4 or 5 guys to a car in order to save as much money as possible, because the company just does not pay for them to do the things that they have to do in order to get from one show to the next. And this is just the minor stuff, right? This is just the minor things that these are the misdemeanors of Vince McMahon. But I guess that brings us, when talking about travel, brings us to the most recent thing that's I think broke outside of the wrestling bubble and hit the news.
Please.
Which was,
no one's talking about this, and it's fucking blowing my mind.
Yeah. So I guess the background is, so WWE recently has been in bed with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and I do say
friends of the show,
MBS,
yeah,
come on.
And I do have to. And I do have to explain how kind of bizarre this relationship is, because there's a thing in professional wrestling called, they call it a couple different names, but it's called a paid show. It's basically, say I have a professional wrestling company and there's a guy who runs a car, and I run it, every week. I do my own thing. But there's a guy who runs a car dealership, right? And he wants to have a big sale, and he wants to have, some wrestlers come out and put on the show at the car dealership, right? Well, then I'll say, all right, I'm going to send some guys over, put on a wrestling show. You give me the money, you pay for it. I don't have to worry about selling tickets. And the real thing of it is, it's not really an important thing for me or the storylines that I'm running, or it's almost like a non-canon show, right? Because some guy is just paying for me to put on this show for him with my wrestlers, right? It's a bought show, it's paid for. A high profile example of this is that the Capcom fighting game tournaments bought a show from New Japan Pro Wrestling, which is the biggest wrestling company in Japan, and they basically bought a show from them. Now, these shows are not supposed to be important, essential things. You're not spending a lot of money advertising it because it's already paid for. Some mark has already, with too much money, has already paid you to run the show, and it's just easy money, right? The thing with, and when WWE started doing these shows in Saudi Arabia, that's what people thought they were going to be doing. They were just going to be these shows. They were going to send some guys over, do the show, not really talk about it on their own TV show, not really advertise it, not promote it, not have, big important matches that matter to their overall storylines. I think that was the general assumption, that these were just going to be kind of vanity shows for some crown princes who like the Undertaker. That's generally the vibe that people got from it. But it's actually been the complete opposite. It's been, I'm assuming that KSA, this is from KSA, who's paying for these shows, promising to pay, not necessarily paying, but we'll get to that later. these shows have been promoted as the biggest shows that WWE is doing each year. Bigger than WrestleMania. The things that happen on the shows, the matches that happen, are some of the most important events that happen on WWE Wrestling. If you are following WWE, you need to tune in on at like 10 a.m. on a Tuesday morning to watch these Saudi Arabian shows to see who's going to win the title, to see The Undertaker and Goldberg have a once in a lifetime match. These are promoted by WWE.
I'm drinking it at TGIF at that time, so I can't even make it in for that.
Yeah, and they're WWE promotes them endlessly, as these big things. Now they started doing this before the Khashoggi murder. And then when the Khashoggi murder happened, if you might recall this, they had, a show scheduled in Saudi Arabia, and people were wondering, are they going to cancel the show? Because a lot of businesses in the United States were, saying they weren't going to do business with Saudi Arabia anymore. And, not only did they run the show, like they kept promoting it on their own TV instead of keeping it quiet, and that kind of revealed that these shows aren't just like these sort of vanity things for Saudi Arabia to say, look at us, we can buy a WWE show and have them come and do a performance for us. This is part of their international propaganda campaign. They want people to see, oh, you like WWE, well, you have to like Saudi Arabia, because the best matches of the year are going to be happening in Saudi Arabia from now on.
Whoa. So that's the fucking angle.
Yeah.
It's propaganda for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and you, as I said, that wasn't what expected, because usually with these paid shows, they're like bullshit that don't matter to your company. But for example, on this last one that they just did, the title changed hands. The WWE title changed hands on this Saudi Arabia show. And that's got in a really big match and a really big deal. If you don't watch that show, you don't know what the fuck's going on. You have to, like, that they've made it an essential part of their continuity, when in the past, like, there have been shows and matches and title changes that take place in other countries, and they'll pretend that they didn't even happen. Like Antonio Inoki won the WWF title at one point, but they didn't acknowledge it on TV. They just pretended like it never ever happened, and it's the complete opposite happening right now. They're promoting these shows as big as anything that they do.
Now, and tell me if I'm understanding these correctly, but if they are potentially compromising the storyline for the WWE, what sort of recompense are they getting from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia? What's the green involved?
Well, here's the thing. So the reason why these shows are important to WWE is because WWE is kind of struggling financially, basically, and they need this influx of cash from Saudi Arabia in order to keep running. Funny part is, of course, is that Saudi Arabia has not actually been paying WWE for these shows. They haven't been paying them the money they promised. But
they're out a lot of money on WeWork, like we talked about last week.
Yeah. So they haven't been really delivering on the money, and that's kind of why people are saying the shit show that happened with the last show in Riyadh happened. So with the last show in Riyadh, notable for a couple reasons. One, the title changed hands on it, with making it an essential part of watching WWE and, putting Saudi Arabia, doing that propaganda work for them. Another thing, this is the first time they were able to have a women's match on the show. And when the show started, women weren't even allowed to attend. And people started noticing that, none of the women wrestlers would come, and the fans actually got pretty upset about this and, had like a trending topic about it. So what WWE did very slickly is, while they were running the week they were running a show in Saudi Arabia, they did their first all women's pay-per-view and like patted themselves on the back for putting on their first all women's wrestling pay-per-view, because all the men were in Saudi Arabia and none of the women could come over. They were able to, and Stephanie McMahon, I forget her specific position in the companies, but she's basically second to Vince, is very big on celebrating all the firsts that WWE is doing by treating the female wrestlers as actual wrestlers when they've been treated as fucking garbage for most of WWE's history because of her father and her decision and to treat these women like shit. Now they've been patting themselves on the back because they're not treating them as shitty as they were treating them before, but it's of their own volition, their own choice. So they had the first women's match. Of course, the women were covered from head to toe. They weren't allowed to wear their regular gear. They not only did they have to wear full gear that covered their whole body, they also had to wear a t-shirt over that same gear in order to do the match. And of course, WWE, pat themselves on the back for doing the first women's match in Saudi Arabia. So props to them. And the other final thing that's probably the most notable thing about it is that, the majority of the roster and the crew that did the show in Saudi Arabia got stranded there for I think well over 24 hours, basically.
What?
Yeah. So, yeah, after the show, right, everybody's supposed to be flying back because they have, and this is another shitty thing by WWE, they all had to fly, it's a very long flight, right? And they all had to fly back and do a show in the U.S. within, I forget, 16 hours, basically. They had to go for
What?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Just completely nuts. Way too much to ask. And then they were going to Europe right after that too, and I think they did. And so, Vince McMahon gets on the plane first, right? He's always the first one. He was the first out, right? And then there was another flight for, the VIPs, Brock Lesnar, the boxer Tyson Fury, a couple others. They get their charter flight out. And, all the, the less important people, the less important wrestlers, they're, on their big jumbo jet. And they're told various things, including that there was some mechanical problems with the flight. The pilots timed out, all this stuff, but a lot of them didn't really buy it because this is WWE. This is a big money deal. There's millions and millions of dollars involved in this, and you're saying you can't get them a flight back to the U.S. So what happened was that then there was a charter flight taking just 20 people, the most important wrestlers, back and getting them out of Saudi Arabia in order for them to possibly make the show that they were doing in the U.S., which was a live TV show on Fox. So that's also kind of a big deal that WWE is required.
Did they make that? Did that show get canceled, or did that go on?
No, they had to put it on. They couldn't cancel it. That's they can't cancel it. What ended up happening was they brought, and this is another fucked up thing. So because so many wrestlers had to miss that SmackDown show, WWE has a brand called NXT, which is supposed to be for developmental talent, wrestlers who are still in training. So they pay them much, much, much less than anybody else, right? But recently, they started putting this NXT, this show, on USA Network in order to compete with AEW, which is their new competitor, which they're kind of afraid of. So they're already exploiting these people because they're putting them on the same network that they put all their main stars, who are making, some of them who are making millions. They put them on NXT. As far as I know, they didn't get much a raise. The last I heard, they didn't get a raise because they're on network TV now. Before they were just on the internet, but now they're on network TV, And so they got some of those NXT guys and then put them on like broadcast TV on Fox, the big show, and then there was a really recent big money deal to get SmackDown on there. So they brought all those NXT guys over in order to fill in for the wrestlers who couldn't get over. And, you know, from what we heard from people said, it was a really exciting show because all these young wrestlers were kind of allowed to do what they want to do instead of, you know, the normal boring as shit WWE show. Now, the interesting thing about this, of course, is that, well, all those wrestlers who were stuck in Saudi Arabia were really pissed off. They were really upset about what was going on. And a lot of people were saying, oh, this is the time to unionize. This is the time, you know, to, you know, take a stand, take some power back from the company. You shouldn't be going through this. Well, now we know that if those wrestlers decide to do that, what WWE can do is bring all those NXT developmental guys up, not pay them anymore, and put on a better show than what they had been put on before. So that kind of, you know, so basically they used them as like pre-scabs to run
scabs
the show.
in training.
And kind of take away that power and that anger that all those wrestlers meant. And I do say, like you know, the wrestlers were super angry about this. WWE wrestlers don't complain online, generally speaking. They're very much locked down with what they can say online and the podcast, whatever. But a lot of them like broke that level of kayfabe, as we say, and complained online about it. And they've been complaining, you know, in the past couple of weeks, saying more and more stuff that they're dissatisfied with in the WWE because they were treated like garbage. They felt that they were abandoned by Vince McMahon, the captain of the ship in Saudi Arabia, in this country, you know, that's known for executing people and chopping up Khashoggi.
Not to mention that they're probably all like carrying a bunch of gear with them too, right? Like, how did they? They like in there with needles and testosterone and fucking Anavar.
I don't know how much of that
trenbolone and stuff.
I don't know how much of that is still going on, but I think most of those were on the charter plane to the private plane. Those guys were fine, but yeah, all these regular guys, you know, all these lower level guys, they're like stuck in this country, and they're hearing, you know, the scarier thing is that they're hearing that this, you know, they were stuck there because Vince McMahon got into a dispute with the Saudi guys he was working with over that lack of payment. And this, you know, keeping that plane there was like a taste of revenge because allegedly Vince McMahon played hardball and said, I'm not going to give you in Saudi Arabia the feed of the show until I get paid, which is like a really like ballsy thing to say while you're in Saudi Arabia to, like, you know, possible royalty that you're going to hold up this show that they're excited for and supposed to be airing on their networks until you get paid.
So you mentioned those what you call the developmental wrestlers, and I found it might be a little outdated, but I saw an article from 2010 where their starting base salary is $35,000 a year. Is that still accurate, or is it higher than that now?
Wow.
Oh, I wouldn't suspect it's higher. I'm surprised it's that high. It used to be $500 a week. Used to be $500 a week.
Wow.
And add on top of that, like you said, these are independent contractors. They're paying for their own travel. They're paying for their own health insurance. And certainly, you know, insurance companies are not too eager to insure these guys for any sort of, you know, reasonable rate.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't treat any of their wrestlers well, but the developmental guys, and they've hired a lot more. They've expanded their developmental crew a lot. The funny thing is, like, their WWE's training is really not any good. Any of the wrestlers who end up being good coming out of developmental or people who were trained elsewhere, who traveled to World Wrestling before they got to WWE already. I can't remember the last star that WWE actually created themselves that was worth a shit in the ring. So they like that's one of the things about WWE is like Vince McMahon's like he has these, you know, ideas and these obsessions, and he's trying to fight against a wrestling system that worked so much better than the system he has right now. And no matter how much money or time he throws at it, he really can't escape it. Still the best wrestler. He cannot, they built this big, huge performance center with, 4 rings and, 2 full-size gyms and yada, yada, yada. And still the best talent that they ever get are people who like worked in bingo halls for a few years and traveled around and did wrestling the old school way, basically.
Good God.
And we still haven't even gotten to the worst thing that Vince has done. We still haven't gotten to the worst stuff.
Yeah, so some of these, I guess you sent us a list of some of the things you want to talk about, and I looked into them a little bit, and it's just it's things I wasn't familiar with, though. Just some very, harrowing sort of stories. Can you tell us a little bit about Owen Hart?
Okay, so Owen Hart. So this is a felony. This is one of Vince's felonies, not one of his misdemeanors.
What?
This is a major one. Okay, so Owen Hart, well-known wrestler, comes from a wrestling family. The Harts. Everybody who knows anything about wrestling knows them. They're legends in Canada. They used to run the Territory Stampede wrestling. And Owen was, one of the younger wrestlers from this family. He was, known as a wrestler, like a extremely talented guy who could do it all in the ring. He could talk. He could be, world champion easily. He's a guy that you could do anything with, right? But as his brother Bret Hart also worked for WWE, and he was champion for quite some time, but he ended up leaving WWE because WCW was offering him a lot more money. He left with the approval of Vince McMahon because Vince McMahon said, "I can't pay you as much as them." They had a good Vince and Bret had a good relationship up to that point. But it ended up turning sour when Vince asked Bret to lose the title in Canada, and Bret didn't really want to do it. He wanted to lose it outside of Canada because Bret, takes that very seriously, maybe too seriously, but that's kind of beside the point. So what Vince does is he it's called the Montreal screw job, where he he basically went off script on Bret without telling Bret and made him lose the title when it was not the plan for him to lose the title. He wasn't told of it. He just screwed him out of it. So, Bret ends up leaving after that, obviously, Bret, along with his brother-in-law, David Boy Smith. But Owen, wants to leave too, but Vince McMahon keeps him under contract. He does not let him leave and go with his family to WCW, the other company. And so what does, Vince do now that he's holding on to Owen Hart and won't let him leave, and he wants to leave? He gives him this, comedy gimmick, or character. Gimmick is a name for it, kind of like a character in wrestling, where he's like a bad superhero. And he's like he calls himself the Blue Blazer. Everybody knows this. He wears a mask, even though everybody knows it's Owen Hart under the mask. He's just this completely ridiculous character, treated as a joke, because it makes Vince McMahon laugh, right? So it's a very funny thing, right? And then at a certain point, so there was a wrestler in WCW named Sting who would come down from the rafters and attack his opponent. He would dress like the Crow and had the Crow face paint. It was really cool. Yeah, it was awesome. It was really cool. Vince McMahon's idea was, because the Blue Blazer thinks he's a superhero too, like the Crow, that he should come down from the rafters. But because he's a bad superhero, he should get tangled up in the harness while he's coming down. Now, these harnesses are designed with multiple safety measures in place so you don't get tangled and you don't fall to your death. But in order for him to get tangled, they had to disengage one of the safety measures that was keeping Owen Hart alive, and they did do that. And this was on a live show, a pay-per-view, fans in the audience, live on TV. His friends watching, commentating from the desk, his co-workers there, all the wrestlers there. He gets tangled up as he's supposed to, and the other safety goes, and he plummets to his death inside the ring.
Jesus Christ.
And what Vince McMahon WWE does, the call they make is to get him out of the ring, because he's dead already by the time when he hits.
Oh my God.
And keep the show running. That's the call that Vince McMahon
my
made.
God.
Kept the show running. When Vince is asked about this, I'm not sure if it's Vince or somebody speaking for him, but basically says that, we didn't want to stop the show because then there would have been a riot. And
please,
that is not true. That is not true. I know a lot about wrestling. I know about wrestling riots. They have happened before. They have not happened because the fans saw someone fall to their death and they stopped the show. That's not how that works. And the thing about, because at that point, that's a crime scene, right? That's a crime scene.
Yes.
When somebody dies from criminal negligence in that ring, but by Vince McMahon keeping the show running, he gets to cover his tracks. And he didn't, I cannot imagine, I can't think about, well, I know how, but it's completely absurd that somebody didn't go to jail for that. It was just criminal negligence.
Was there no liability then thrown at the fucking company, or?
Well, Owen Hart's wife did successfully sue them. I'm not sure if it was the lawsuit or they settled for pretty large sum. Obviously not enough to replace her loving husband, who she had several children with, and was looking forward to a future with. But and she also made it so that WWE could not, at least for a few years, could not mention, use, or profit from his image. So good for her for also giving him that little bit of fuck you justice.
Unbelievable.
And the thing that spawned from Owen's death that WWE immediately began taking advantage of is the post-death show that they do. So because when Owen died the next night, at the pay-per-view, the next night they had WWE Raw, and they brought out all his friends, all his co-workers, all these people who've known him for years, and had them talk into the camera to the fans on TV about how much they love and miss Owen. And you get this sense of warmth and how sad it is coming from WWE, the company that killed him. They were able to use his friends to kind of scrub the fact that they killed him.
Less than 24 hours before.
Yeah, less than 24 hours before. And they have done after Owen Hart's death, they did a few more of these shows. They did one for Eddie Guerrero, whose heart just gave out when he was 43 because of the drugs he had used and the steroids he had used under WWE. I think they stopped doing them after the Chris Benoit incident, because they also started doing a tribute show to Chris Benoit without knowing the full circumstances of that case, and knowing that he was a family annihilator, murderer, and that he killed himself and his family. They didn't find out until about 20 minutes left into the show that that's what happened. So I think that's why they stopped the tribute shows. But the point of those shows was to exploit the sadness and the grief of all these people that knew these wrestlers, in order to detract from the fact that WWE was culpable in all of their deaths. And that's just one. That's just one felony. That's just one.
God.
I don't even have anything to say. I'm just fucking gutted.
Yeah. So another felony. This is a really old one. Jimmy Snuka. Jimmy Superfly Snuka. I think most people, even if they don't know wrestling, have seen that image of him jumping from the top of the cage at Madison Square Garden. What you might not know is that he beat his girlfriend to death in a hotel room in the 80s, and Vince McMahon helped cover up the murder. He, he worked with the cops. There's implications that he may have paid off the police who were investigating it, and threatened the family of the victim, saying that if it goes to court, if they make a big fuss, we're going to say that your daughter was actually, instead of the girlfriend, was actually a prostitute, and smear her name.
What the fuck?
And Vince McMahon, it's hard to find because this is a really old case. I was trying to look up the information. It was available a few years ago, but I couldn't find it because this was actually taken to trial very recently. Jimmy Fly Snuka was able to get off basically, but he was indicted for it eventually, and then he died a couple of years later. But the original information that I from my recollection of somebody who was investigating this case and staying on this case for a few years, saying that Vince McMahon was personally involved in this cover up, in this threatening the family, and this helping his wrestler basically get away with murder.
Wow. Okay.
I don't think we have anything funny to say. So give us another one. I mean, he's got a couple. Doesn't he have a couple? He's got a history of some sexual assault as well, doesn't he, Vince McMahon?
Yeah. So I don't know much about, because he was accused by
in 2006 in Florida in the tanning salon. Yeah.
He was accused by I think by a referee. Like, it's hard because there's so much stuff. Like, if you Google Vince McMahon rape, like a bunch of stuff is gonna come up, and you're not even like, there's so many things. Yeah,
all of it believable, probably.
Yeah. There was a woman in a tanning salon in Boca Raton, but there's also like another woman who actually worked for WWE. I think she was a referee, if I recall correctly, who says that she was McMahon sued rape claims by a former WWE referee. There's just so much stuff. The rape allegation that's I think we have the most information on right now is the most recent, is there was a wrestler named Ashley Massaro who worked for WWE, and I use the term wrestler usually loosely, because not to denigrate Ashley at all, but she was really like more of a model than a wrestler. For a period of time, WWE would hire like models straight from like a swimsuit catalog and try to turn them into wrestlers. Now, this was bad for these women because being a wrestler is very, very difficult on your body, on your mind, on everything. This is not, it's not an easy lifestyle, especially with WWE as much as they work. So a lot of these women would always, be injured, get hurt. They would need to like put on weight. Like these would be women who would like need to be using steroids because they're, naturally fairly thin, but in order to be a successful wrestler, you need like a little meat on your bones or you're going to break those bones. And Ashley Massaro was, one of these models hired. She really like loved wrestling and enjoyed it. This is not taking anything away from her, but it was not necessarily the business for her. I'm not sure how much she knew about, everything she was going to have to deal with going in. And I definitely don't think any wrestler would expect it would happen to her, because while they were on one of their Tribute to the Troops USO tours, she says that she was drugged and raped by a soldier while she was visiting a clinic overseas. And the kicker is, when she gets back home and gets back to U.S. and tells, Vince McMahon and his staff about this, they tell her to basically keep it quiet because the Tribute to the Troop shows are so important.
Oh, fuck you.
Fuck that shit.
Fuck
Jesus
you.
fucking Christ.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and she was part of a lawsuit, kind of a class action lawsuit by a lot of wrestlers suing WWE for a number of things. And this is what she said in her sworn affidavit. And this came out and nobody really, talked about it. But then she passed, I believe, from a drug overdose. She had dealt with a lot of problems with drug addiction. There was people were always talk about her. When they talked about her, they would be like, "Oh, Ashley, she's a mess. She's a drug addict, etc., etc." Well, I
Jesus
think
Christ.
now, knowing what we know now, we can kind of see why she might have been that, and just her testimony, reading the affidavit, is really gut wrenching. And when she did die, this her testimony was brought back into the spotlight by people, and WWE's response, which is one of the most awful things I've ever seen a corporation do. This because WWE is not like other corporations. They're willing to be dirtier, nastier, and grosser. Is that they released this letter that Ashley had wrote them. Now remember how I said like most wrestlers end up, destitute and broke, and with nothing after they leave. And her career had been, over for a while with them. And she had sent them a letter sort of trying to apologize for being part of the lawsuit and kind of trying to take it back in order to get in their good graces. Because if you can get in their good graces, then they'll bring you back. They'll let you, appear at a show and pay you to do this. They'll put you on what they call a Legends contract, where you get a little bit of extra money besides your typical residuals. And so, to discount her sworn affidavit, they released this private letter that she sent to the company, basically like her being kind of desperate, trying to get some money to support her and her daughter. And then also said that, well, we were made aware of an inappropriate medical exam. Was their wording on what the rape was? I mean, which is, I'm shocked that they actually acknowledge it that much, because if you're acknowledging that much happened, you're basically saying what she said was, credible. So that's all the major felonies that I would think Vince McMahon. There's a few more. If you just look at the general, culture of steroid abuse that took the lives of so many wrestlers. That's one like massive. That's more of a mass murder type thing, as opposed to an individual felony. But there's a few misdemeanors if you're a little bit too down. These aren't as bad. There is a wrestler called Dawn Marie. Just a wrestler who was with the company for a few years. She had been in the wrestling business for a while, and she got fired for getting pregnant. And I wish there was more to the story, but there isn't. They just straight up released. She got pregnant, had to take time off for that, and they released her while she was pregnant. And they got sued for this, rightfully so. I'm not sure what the outcome was, but this is the thing to keep in mind, because Stephanie McMahon, Vince McMahon's daughter, likes to present herself as this forward-thinking feminist corporate spokesperson, and she was running the show when Dawn Marie got fired for being pregnant. Another one that happened is a wrestler named CM Punk. You probably heard of him. He's probably one of the last wrestlers to really break out of the WWE orbit into the wider world of pop culture. He was a big star for WWE a number of years, but as I said, he wasn't somebody that they made. This was somebody who came from the independent circuit, made his name there, and then brought it to WWE. He, was super popular, one of the most popular wrestlers they had, but he was always kind of kept down, held down, never given his proper due by the company, never allowed to main event WrestleMania. I guess now he would want to main event one of the shows in Saudi Arabia, but he didn't last that long. He ended up exiting the company, quitting the company, because of a number of issues. One, he was, burnt out. He wasn't having fun doing it anymore. And the other reason is that he had all these medical issues. And I don't just mean like, he had nagging injuries, even though he did have those. I don't just mean he had like concussions, because he did have those. CTE is a big problem in WWE as well. But he had WWE has their own in-house doctors, right? And if the company is paying for these doctors, they don't work for you and your health. They're working for the company to make sure the show goes on. Just like when the show went on when Owen Hart died, the show must go on. So CM Punk had, I think, this some kind of infection on him, or some kind of cyst, some sort of thing. I forget exactly what it was.
He had MRSA.
Yeah.
He had a major staph infection.
Yeah.
What?
Major staph infection, and the doctors just kept giving him like hyper antibiotics that would like make him like puke and shit himself. He shit himself in the ring on TV, and like he had to like go and see his own doctor in order to get the proper they call it Z-Packs. That's what he kept being given.
Zithromax.
Yeah, and he had to go and see his own doctor to get diagnosed, because otherwise, and if he had not done that, he would have died. He would have died. He said, he told the company, fuck you, I'm not coming back. I'm going to get this taken care of. And Vince McMahon got on the phone and said, we really need you to do this and that. We need you at the show. And CM Punk was like, no, fuck you. I am sick. I feel like crap. I need to take this time and get checked out. And, he did. And he basically did not. And he never really formally quit. A lot of people thought he formally quit, but he didn't. He just didn't know when he was going to come back. And then Vince McMahon sent him his firing papers on his wedding day.
Oh my God.
Well, there's another issue with him as well, I believe, where he had a concussion and they were scheduled to go to Europe, right? And he went to see like their in-house doctor, and the doctor diagnosed him, with having a concussion, but basically said like, well, if you have a concussion, you can't go to Europe. So what do you think? Do you have a concussion or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know where that stands in the Hippocratic Oath. I think that's a little...
Do no harm to my boss, Vince McMahon.
Yeah, and that's really, that's really worth, putting the spotlight on for a second, because the reason WWE is so big on at least, pretending to care about concussions is because of Chris Benoit. Because when he murdered his family, the media narrative circled around the numerous concussions he had, and the doctor saying that his brain was basically Swiss cheese at that point. He did that, and so that's why they had to pretend to care about concussions. But as CM Punk revealed, they didn't really remember taking any of that to heart. Now, the addendum to the CM Punk story, he tells all these stories about how he was treated and how this doctor screwed him over and mistreated him on his friend Colt Cabana's podcast. And this was years ago. This was before every single, celebrity had a podcast. I don't know how many people listen to it, but I doubt it's like that many people listen to it compared to like sees the average, WWE tweet or whatever. But when he did this podcast, and WWE, the doctor that CM Punk criticized on the show sued CM Punk for millions of dollars. Of course, with the help and approval of WWE and probably influence of WWE. They sued, this wrestler who had given his all to them in the ring, had almost died for them, had gotten multiple concussions for them, and he sued, and they helped this, hack piece of shit doctor sue him for millions of dollars, basically trying to destroy his life and Colt Cabana's life over a fucking podcast. Just, one of the most, and it's just this petty, thing where they cannot lose. They cannot admit that they fucked up. They cannot accept anything. So they, like anybody who speaks out, they have to worry about getting sued for millions of dollars as well.
As we've established, if he'd only said allegedly.
Yeah.
So I just want to quickly circle back to something you had said before, Leslie, which the idea that like the WWE is like willing to play a little dirtier, especially like publicly, right, in the way it treats its employees and things. And the reason why that stuck out to me is I was thinking about, like, I mean, obviously on this show we talk a lot about a variety of different companies across different industries, and we're always like looking at these kind of like structural questions. You know, how much of it is the particular idiosyncrasies of the various like people at the top, and how much is it the structure of the market and the company that like pushes them to do that? And obviously you have this divergence here where like you're saying that here's this company that's willing to be more outwardly shitty. And I was wondering if you see that as something that is caused by the nature of like the spectacle of something like the WWE, where they're, you know, because they're basically trafficking in melodrama, right? So like, are they willing to be a little bit more publicly melodramatic because of this like meta media component to it? Or would you say it has something more to do with like Vince McMahon and his personality and his kind of command of the company?
Oh, I definitely think it's about Vince. It's not about the wrestling company or wrestling industry, really, because WWE really is a unique thing where it's a wrestling company and this, you know, giant corporation. But it's also kind of not a giant corporation because it's run by this one guy and his dipshit kids, right? Like it's kind of a hybrid. It has like the worst of both worlds. There's not really any other companies, wrestling companies like this that you compare it to. Like for example, like New Japan, as far as the wrestling side of it is all handled by like, you know, this older wrestler who kind of runs the company and says who's going to win, who's going to lose. But they're owned by, you know, this parent company that sells, you know, like card games and has a bunch of money, right? And so those two kind of things aren't as intertwined as they are in WWE. In WWE, the same guy who runs, you know, who does the licensing deals and all this other shit is the same guy who week to week says what's going to happen on the TV show. Like that is just a very strange, weird thing. It's like I don't know. It's if like Bob Iger was writing like the Marvel movies himself, right?
Well, like you said as well, and like you know, Vince McMahon, he like so integral to the show is this sort of parody, kind of awful version of himself that he plays as a character. You know what I mean? Like his whole kayfabe, his whole shtick is being outwardly shitty.
Yeah, and when you talk about how shitty he is on the whole, you might get the impression that nobody possibly could like him, but there are actually a lot of wrestlers, including ones who've been screwed over by him, who get along with him fine, who thinks he's, you know, this, you know, great, interesting guy. But, you know, if
a lot like Trump.
Yes, very.
Yeah, Trump,
Yeah.
another character who plays. You know, I often think that like the version of Trump that got elected president is like the character of Donald Trump that was created
Absolutely.
on The Apprentice.
Absolutely.
And WWE.
Yeah,
he was a character
exactly,
on WWE.
yeah.
Why are you here? Let me put it very simply, Vince. I'm taller than you. I'm better looking than you. I think I'm stronger than you. Wow. And I'm here to challenge you to a match in WrestleMania.
What? Oh, I get it. It's the Battle of the Billionaires.
That's right.
But even when you listen to some of those leaked audio from like Michael Cohen when Trump was talking about hush money and shit like that, he's like demure as shit. He's like,
Right.
Hey, Mike.
Right.
He's like, hey, Michael. So you're gonna take care of that thing, right? Okay, I don't want to worry too much about it. It's like a totally different person instead of the liberal media. Very, very different dude.
There is just on this line, if I can do like a slight bit of a theory tangent here, because this is something I was thinking about in preparation for the show. I was thumbing through an old copy of a book I have, Empire of Illusion by Chris Hedges, way back from 2009, and he has this. It's basically a sort of society of spectacle type argument about the United States writ large as this like like society mediated entirely through these spectacular dramas and the way that they relate to the oppression of capital. And the opening of his book, he spends a while talking about WWE and its relationship, and he talks about in particular this one character who I'm not familiar with because I'm not a big wrestling fan, but maybe Leslie, you would know JBL.
Yeah, John Bradshaw Layfield. Yeah, who basically he's kind of like his character is is like a proto Trump character, right? Like, well, not necessarily proto because Trump was around already, but he was, he's supposed to be this rich, asshole who is like political, but not like explicitly so. In real life, he is like he's a jobs program Republican in real life.
Right, yeah. He's like his whole shtick his gimmick was like he's a self-made millionaire, and he had like a few books, like self-help books of like, I think one of them was just like how to have more money now.
Yeah. He's definitely one of those guys. That was made into his on-screen persona for a while, and he got to be basically the secondary champion for quite a long time on WWE. I'm sure Vince McMahon saw a lot of in that character of himself in the character.
Yeah, and so the way that Hedges uses him, and then he takes an anecdote of one of his bouts with one of the other characters in WWE, and he uses it to highlight like this change that is identified, and again, maybe other more astute wrestling fans can confirm this, but the kind of argument that he's making here is that during the Cold War, the WWE focused a lot on these narratives about like these sort of like racialized narratives of, the foreign invaders, the foreign bad guys, whether they were Russian or then later kind of like Arab/Iranian, like vague Middle Easterners.
Yeah, they were less racist and more xenophobic, I have to say. More leaning on the xenophobic than the racism, but of course the racism was there.
And so then the transition that Hedges is picking up on is like post-recession. There was this emergence of this narrative which speaks to, the example he's using here again is this guy JBL, but also, as you were saying, like Vince McMahon sort of embodies this himself as like the shitty boss. And if I could here just read a little bit talking about these specific types of bouts. They are public expressions of pain and a fervent longing for revenge. The lurid and detailed sagas behind each bout, rather than the wrestling matches themselves, are what drive crowds to a frenzy. These ritualized battles give those packed in the arenas a temporary, heady release from mundane lives. The burden of real problems is transformed into fodder for a high-energy pantomime. And the most potent story tonight, the most potent story across North America, is one of financial ruin, desperation, and enslavement of a frightened and abused working class to a heartless, tyrannical corporate employer. For most, it is only in the illusion of the ring that they are able to rise above their small stations in life and engage in a heroic battle to fight back.
And that was 2009, you said?
Mm-hmm. And just following a little further on here, the narratives expose the anxiety that we will die and never be recognized or acclaimed, that we will never be wealthy, that we are not among the chosen, but remain part of the vast, anonymous masses. The ringside sagas are designed to reassure us. They hold out the hope that we, humble and unsung as these celebrities once were, will eventually be blessed and graced with fortune. And I think about that in terms of there's this like dual nature to the character that like Vince McMahon is performing in the ring, but then as we've also said, like in real life too, like publicly. And this is also, I think the Trump connection here is that like the people who like him or as fans, right? It's like you like him because of his awfulness, right? Like because of how shitty and terrible he is, because maybe also embedded in there, and this is this weird cultural attribute, like there's this aspirational thing. Like he's the guy with all the money, and if only one day I too was a super rich asshole, I could be petty, I could take out all of my small little vengeances and my feelings in all of these ways. And so in a weird way, it kind of fuels this character. It's this kind of like inverted, I don't know, like capitalist logic, like embedded into it, right? Even just in the fandom.
Yeah, so it's kind of, so I feel I have to kind of take Chris Hedges to task a little bit because nobody was that into anything that JBL did. It was actually a rather ignominious title run that he was in, because like a lot of people just not, because the worst thing in wrestling is not to be, you know, booed, is to get no reaction at all. And for a long time he really got no reaction until Eddie Guerrero kind of came along, who was you know a I believe he was born in Mexico, Mexican wrestler who fought him and feuded with him and kind of gave him, you know, some, you know, a really hot, you know, baby face for him to fight against. But JBL was never interesting a character to the majority of the fans, I have to say. So it's nice to talk about, you know, this grand stage that this was all taking place on, but like most of half those arenas were like, you know, empty. You know, the arenas were half empty. It wasn't that big a deal. Now the Vince McMahon thing, though, Vince McMahon at one point was, you know, a very big character. It came from when I talked about the screw job where Bret Hart, where he screwed over the, you know, one of the more popular characters that WWE ever had in Bret Hart. In real life, he screwed him over and then became an on-screen character who feuded with Stone Cold Steve Austin, who was just this beer-swilling badass. And up until that point, it was not acknowledged on WWE TV that Vince McMahon even ran the company. He was just an announcer. But when the Bret Hart thing happened, they acknowledged that he ran the company. And he became this character who was in constant dispute with Stone Cold. And they you know, the common theory of why that was such a hot angle is basically kind of Chris Hedges thing, but a little bit less flourished. Is basically just saying, well, everybody hates their boss, right? So Stone Cold Steve Austin beating up his boss was a hot angle.
He's the everyman, yeah.
But when it comes to the Trump thing, like if Trump were, I often say, you know, if Trump were a character in WWE during, you know, in wrestling during normal times, he would be a heel. He would be a bad guy. But why do so many people legitimately love him so much in the real world? And I just think that, you know, there's a little bit, you know, there's something a little bit stronger to people's ideologies and their beliefs than what they might bring to like a pro wrestling angle, where of course, you know, you're going to cheer for Stone Cold when he's beating up Vince McMahon, but over in the real world, in your real life, you're, you know, voting essentially for Vince McMahon to be the president of the United States. So I just think it's a little bit more complex in the real, when you try to bring these narratives to the real world. The things that, you know, people react to and how they react in wrestling don't necessarily predict how they may react in the real world to similar, you know, things that they see.
I think though that whole, like, just even the construction of the narrative, as you said, like, you know, everybody hates their boss, right? Like I do think somewhere in there there's that like Steinbeck idea where it's like socialism never took root in America because everybody thinks they're a temporarily embarrassed millionaire.
Yeah.
Right. Because like the fans of the WWE, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong here, they're not the wealthy, right? Like the typical fan base is, you know, working class.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's another thing. It's a self-selecting thing. So the people who are supporting Trump in real life might not be the ones who are voting, who might not be WWE fans, basically, in general. Yeah, so it's not like it's the same thing. So that's why, you know, with Hedges, you know, that's a wonderfully written paragraph, but I don't know how much it says about America, what was going on WWE SmackDown in 2005 on Friday nights on UPN. You know.
So did we want to talk about Linda McMahon a little bit?
You know, I don't really have a lot to say about her specifically. other than her character is by far the most boring McMahon, she is the most uncomfortable.
But she also has like a character on the
Oh
show.
yeah. She was a character.
Oh, I wasn't even aware of that.
Yeah, the whole family has a character. She's the most boring, and she's a horrible performer. She's just boring. She sucks the air out of the room. I don't know how she makes it in the corporate world, being so, given how dead she is on TV. I'm assuming she's a little bit better off camera than on. But yeah, I think she basically, the reason why she became so important in the company was after around the steroid trial. And there was so much heat on Vince McMahon, and people thought Vince McMahon might end up going to jail. So then she became like a bigger, taking the focus off of Vince. I think her title was actually like president of the company at a certain point. But yeah, she's now the administrator. She was up until March. That she was the administrator of the Small Business Administration, because she's friends with Vince McMahon. But I do have one interesting to say about Linda. So she had tried to run for Senate a couple of times, and Vince McMahon, the McMahons, spent their own money funding her campaign. They spent $60 million running her 2 failed Senate campaigns. $60 million of wealth extracted from all those wrestlers, that long list of wrestlers you see who died in squalor and poverty, in dealing with drug addiction. That money could have gone to them. Instead, it went to her vanity Senate campaigns that, flopped. Absolutely flopped.
If I may, the Linda McMahon Senate candidacies have occupied an outsized amount of brain space for me. Like, I remember it so intensely clearly in 2010 when she first ran against who was then the Attorney General for Connecticut, Richard Blumenthal. I'd like to just talk about those Senate campaigns real quick, if I may. Really, really weird. I mean, when she ran in 2010, her motto, or her tagline for her Senate campaign was "A businesswoman, not a politician, for Connecticut." And I mean, like you said, Leslie, it's like she up front said, "I'm willing to spend $50 million of my own money to finance my campaign." In Connecticut.
That's good business. That's what's called good business.
It's working so well for John Delaney as well.
What we didn't mention was WWE is headquartered now in like Stamford, Connecticut,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So there was a familial base. She's not from Connecticut. She's from North Carolina, if I'm not mistaken. But she ran for as a Republican, campaigning mostly on lower taxes, fiscal conservatism, and job creation. So like very much kind of like a Bush sort of era Republican. And she also campaigned at being Connecticut relatively socially moderate, identifying she was like as a pro-choice candidate, even though at the time she was also against partial birth abortion and federal funding for abortions. So she was, I mean, in those debates, and in preparation for this episode, I went back and looked at some of those debates because I kind of remember some of them. And she was talking about, I think it was Richard Blumenthal who got her on minimum wage, about how she said that she wants to lower the minimum wage. And she came back by saying, That's ridiculous. I never said that. What I said was, I agree fundamentally with my opponent that we should raise the minimum wage, and we need to take a look at it. I'm like, okay, that's a no. You don't give a shit. So she lost, for the record, she lost that Senate campaign in 2010. 2012, she ran again, this time against Chris Murphy. And I think at that time I don't remember if he was running for re-election for Senate or he was running from his House seat to become senator. I don't remember. But she very much like 2012 embodied the Tea Party thing. And I just want to read from here from a September 2012 article from Huffington Post written by Matt Sledge. And it was titled Linda McMahon Proposed Social Security Sunset at Tea Party Forum. And basically she said here, I'll just quote her here. She said, "And I do believe that there are ways to look at, what we're trying to do when we put Social Security in place. We didn't go back and review it. In other words, I believe sunset provisions when we pass this kind of legislation. So you take a look at 10, 15 years down the road to make sure that it'll fund itself." So she's saying that a flaw of Social Security was that when it was put into place in the 40s, we should have looked back and said, well, maybe we don't need this anymore now that people are back on their feet.
Where's the security then? It's in the name. It's Social Security. It's insurance. It's supposed to last forever. You don't stop doing insurance just because you're like, oh, now I'm safe. That's not how it works. No. Fundamentally embedded in the concept.
Well, she didn't stop there because she said Medicare is again going to go bankrupt if we don't change it. There have been recommendations of block grants of our seniors looking at choosing what kind of plans they want, but I can tell you one thing I would not do. I would not vote on any rule or law that would take away the benefits that our seniors have today or those that are approaching retirement age because they're counting on those benefits. We have to find another way to pay for it other than impacting our seniors today, and I would not vote for anything that would do that. Obviously, I don't believe that for a fucking second. And I was thinking about it today. I was like, it's weird kind of going back into these debates. I was watching them last night from like 2010 and 2012 because the way that they talk in those debates and even the way that like they were reported on back then seems fucking quaint now. And there was a reporter reporting on the debate from 2012 because Chris Murphy and Linda McMahon said the candidates themselves didn't shy away from taking shots at each other. And it seems fucking quaint now, you know, and especially in comparison of like how Trump debates. And Linda McMahon goes on about how like Chris Murphy says he wants to reach across the aisle, but he votes with his party 98% of the time. And then Chris Murphy in the debate goes back at McMahon saying, well, if you want to talk about free trade, ask Linda because she knows all about it because she moved her manufacturing jobs overseas to China. And it's like when you're listening to these two people when they were running, Chris Murphy, who represents capital, and Linda McMahon, who literally is capital, they were at that time in 2012 politically indistinguishable from each other. And that's why I was watching the debates. I was like, man, I remember it being so explosive. But it seems fucking boring now because aside from like some vague social stances, they were aligned politically. And in one of the debates that I watched, I was reminded about this. Chris Murphy was part of something called the Congressional Center Aisle Caucus, which was a caucus to, quote, promote civility of Congress and change the atmosphere in which Congress works. I mean, like now, who was the congressman that was like in the 1700s and he like beat the other dude with his cane or something? Forgot that guy's name.
That was in the 1800s. I can't remember. That was in the 1800s. That was right before the Civil War. Yeah,
yes,
someone's gonna complain that we don't know that.
We're learning, guys. But the point is that centrist Democrats and the Tea Party Republicans really like weren't different from each other. And I think it went to prove that the Tea Party was extremely effective in pulling the Democrats to the right because obviously the Democrats are, and I'm going to use this now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to use this term 3 episodes in a row now. The Democrats are gormless wusses. The centrist Democrats are gormless wusses. And Leslie, if I may make one slight arithmetic correction, she ended up spending $100 million.
Oh, wow.
Total. $100 million in these campaigns, which, in my opinion, if she really wanted to win it, she could have just taken every voting age Connecticut resident to a very nice meal at Red Lobster for that amount of money. and just do that. And honestly, I think like the weird, scary takeaway for me and kind of like thinking about this and looking back on this in a campaign is the power she wields to change the outcome of governance for Connecticut residents, even when she lost. Because yeah, she didn't win twice over, but she made the liberal opponent become like nearly politically identical to her. And there was even an excerpt in one of the debates when I was watching this with Chris Murphy in 2012 where one of the fucking idiot moderators said, okay, you now have 2 minutes to say something nice about each other. Like they used to do that.
I just, as a quick interjection, I've often dreamed of one day running for something just so I could have the opportunity to say my 2 minutes about what I thought about my opponent.
Exactly. So think about it.
Give me a wide breath and a lot of allegedlys and parodies and all other kinds of things.
But think about like Chris Murphy, like the centrist wuss he is, where he goes on about in those 2 minutes, he goes on about the great things that she's done as a business leader and in the state by investing in charities and that, you know, you've made a difference in people's lives. And for the record, when it was her time, she was like, oh, I like that he has 2 sons.
Wait, I'm sorry. Wait, she said I like him because he has 2 sons?
Well, I think one of the nicest things that I've seen about Congressman Murphy are his 2 little boys. They are so cute. And being a grandmother with 6 little grandchildren, and I look at them and I imagine the kind of pride that he has in watching them every day and wanting to have the best, for them. And so that's something I've noticed with Congressman Murphy and his little boys, and I congratulate him and his wife on having such a nice family.
Anyone could have children.
I know.
How is that a valuative statement? One thing I like about my opponent is that he breathes oxygen and tends to eat calories on a daily basis in order to process them into energy.
What if you and Shane, you stole the words out of my mouth, because if you were standing up there with your hand on the levers of power live and you had 2 minutes of live broadcast, what would you say about a multi-millionaire?
I thinking back about the Linda McMahon thing, it actually maybe this is a good place to end the show on kind of a hopeful note.
It's not on brand for us, but okay.
One of the things that really hurt her campaign was all the bullshit we talked about during the show. Her history of working with the WWE, of the, the steroid abuse, of the, dead and discarded wrestlers, of the not having them designated as independent contractors instead of employees, not giving them health care, of the company taking a bunch of tax credits and then firing a bunch of people. All those things, came back during this campaign, and, her and Vince thought that this was theirs. It was their right as, billionaires to go ahead and buy this political seat. But because they were, so outwardly shittier than the average CEO, they weren't able to do it. They were actually punished a little bit for all the things that they've done. They were denied something that they wanted because of, how awful they are and how many lives they had harmed, exploited, taken advantage of, or outright destroyed. And that's kind of, heartwarming just to think about she really did find on those 2 nights where she was just so sure that she had spent enough money to get this seat. It's just heartwarming to think of how much that hurt her and Vince.
Well, maybe that brings us to the how we try to close these episodes, which is what would be the poetic punishment for these rich folks who do so much harm to the working class. I'd like to open it up for discussion. I think we can open up the ring for this one.
Well, my thing that I really think should happen, first of all, the company is broken up. All their money is sent to various wrestling companies across the United States and the world, and we bring back the old school territories where we have a bunch of different wrestling companies running locally, make wrestling local again. That is something that's for your community, your family, your city, your town, instead of this one mega corporation holding all the cards and having all the power. I think that's what should happen to the McMahons and WWE.
I would say just leave them in Saudi Arabia.
God, because I used to joke that I thought that Vince McMahon at some point would sell the company to Saudi Arabia and just leave all the wrestlers there, and that almost happened in real life. I'm sorry I joked about that before.
I mean, theoretically, could you see a wrestling company that had all in-house promotion and logistics and stuff like that was structured as a worker co-op run by the wrestlers and the administrative staff themselves?
Look, it's kind of complicated, right? Because one of the things, you do need somebody in charge of what's going on TV. You can't. It's hard to run do a co-op story, right? Like you can't do a co-op for screenwriting. But as far as everybody helping out and having different parts of ownership, of the company, yeah, that absolutely can work. In fact, some of the smaller companies in Japan more or less operate like that, even though like the money isn't like that. Like it's still like all the wrestlers work together. They set up the ring, they do the promotions, they sell the tickets. Now there is like a money guy somewhere who kind of floats the whole thing and doesn't do any work. But like a lot of the smaller companies in Japan already more or less kind of function like a sort of co-op. It's kind of complicated because it is also a creative endeavor, and you kind of need somebody who's in boss and who's in charge of firing people. They haven't really figured out how to get around that yet, but my hope is that it will happen. And there's actually a lot of leftists talking about wrestling, thinking about wrestling, working in wrestling. So I would not be surprised at all if something like that didn't happen fairly soon. The main problem, though, is that there is almost no money in wrestling at all. Like the majority of the smaller wrestling companies in the United States that exist have never made a dime. They just make enough money to run the next show. So it is just this kind of creative endeavor for certain people who are just passionate about it. But I would love to see, and the company that's competing with WWE, AEW, that sadly didn't happen because all the wrestlers got together to fight against WWE. It happened because all the wrestlers got together and found their own billionaire to fund the company.
Man, Leslie, I'm probably going to have to take a week or two to recover from this because I feel awful after everything that you've taught us tonight. But thank you so much for joining us to talk to us about this. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Can you please just give us and the listeners a quick primer on Struggle Session and what you got going on?
Yeah, so Struggle Session, you can find the bonus episodes at patreon.com/struggle session. We do 2 bonus episodes a week, not just one. We're not ripping you off like all these other jabronis over here. We give you 2 bonus episodes every week.
Setting a high standard for when we launch our Patreon.
And we talk about politics. We talk about pop culture and how it intersects with politics. We're also doing a special mini-series talking about the truly abysmal Watchmen TV show. I don't know why I'm doing it, but we're responding to it every Monday. New episode. People who don't watch the show do enjoy those episodes, so please do not think you have to watch Watchmen TV, but do listen to the bonus episodes. Patreon.com/struggle session or strugglesession.substack.com.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Look, I think it goes without saying that we're all huge fans of the show, and a lot of people in our cohort are as well. A lot of positive energy coming around that. Stay cool, folks.
I was actually my sign off this week was gonna be "Here Comes the Money."
Oh, I'm unfamiliar with that.
Oh, that's Shane. The only reason I know it is it's Shane McMahon's like opening at WWE.
Oh, really?
Because my name is Shane. People send it to me all the time.
Oh, because your name's Shane.
Oh yeah, no, I'm Shane.
Oh, got it. I didn't make the connection.
We're stopping recording now?
All right, stay cool, folks.